I had always believed my marriage was strong, built on years of love, trust, and mutual respect. My wife and I had met in college, both studying business, and after 3 years of dating, we tied the knot. For 8 years, I thought we were happy. We had built a life together, a comfortable, stable existence that I cherished. My wife, an ambitious and talented woman, worked at a high-end marketing firm, where she had climbed the ranks over the past 4 years. Her boss, Victoria, was a strikingly confident and successful woman who had built the company from the ground up. My wife often described her as intimidating, a force to be reckoned with in the workplace. I had met Victoria a few times at company events. She was always polite but reserved around me, which I had assumed was simple professionalism. Looking back, I now realize her distance had been for entirely different reasons. About 6 months ago, I noticed a shift in my wife's behavior. She became distant, glued to her phone, staying late at work more often than before. The warmth between us had begun to fade, and I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. When I confronted her, fearing the worst, that she was having an affair, she shocked me with something I never expected. "I think we should open our marriage," she said one night after dinner, her voice steady but her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "We're still young. I feel like we're missing out on experiences. Don't you want more excitement in your life?" Her words knocked the air from my lungs. We had never discussed anything like this before. I had always believed we were fulfilled, that what we shared was enough. Our intimacy had never been lacking, or so I thought. When I asked her what had brought this on, she gave vague answers about self-discovery and exploring new dynamics. For weeks, we argued, debated, and even attended marriage counseling in an attempt to understand each other. But she was persistent, insistent that this would strengthen our relationship rather than weaken it. She promised transparency, ground rules, no close friends, complete honesty, and the right to veto any partner the other chose. "This will be good for us," she had assured me. "Trust me." Trust. A word that suddenly felt fragile. I wasn't eager to see other people, but my wife wasted no time. Within days, she had downloaded dating apps and threw herself into this newfound freedom with enthusiasm. She would come home late, the scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering on her clothes. When I asked questions, she dismissed them with a casual, "We agreed not to be jealous," or "It's just physical. Don't make it weird." I tried to ignore the ache in my chest, the growing sense of loneliness in a home that no longer felt like ours. But as the weeks passed and I found myself alone night after night, I realized that if this was our new reality, I should at least try to embrace it. That was when I received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. Victoria, my wife's boss, had reached out, inviting me to coffee to discuss a potential collaboration. It was odd, considering I worked in event planning, not marketing, but curiosity got the best of me. When we met, it quickly became clear that this was not a business meeting. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," Victoria said, her usual confidence softened by something more personal. "But I've wanted to ask you out since the first company Christmas party when we met. Your wife mentioned you're both seeing other people now, so I thought I'd finally take my chance." I was stunned, not only by her interest in me but by the realization that my wife had openly discussed our private arrangement at work. It seemed unprofessional, deeply personal, and yet here we were. Victoria was everything I hadn't known I needed: intelligent, alluring, and genuinely interested in me as a person. Our conversations were effortless, our chemistry undeniable. What had started as an unexpected proposition soon became something far more profound. Dating Victoria was exhilarating. She was passionate, attentive, and made me feel valued in a way I hadn't in months. We bonded over shared interests, late-night conversations, and a level of emotional connection that caught me off guard. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Then my wife found out. It happened when Victoria dropped me off one evening. As I leaned in to kiss her goodbye, my wife pulled into the driveway at the same time. The moment her eyes landed on us, her face twisted from shock to fury in an instant. Without a word, she stormed inside. The second I stepped through the door, the explosion came. "You're dating my boss?" she shrieked, her voice raw with emotion. "Of all the women in this city, you chose Victoria?" I reminded her of our agreement, of how she had been the one who pushed for this in the first place. For months, she had been seeing other men without a second thought. Now, suddenly, it was different. "You don't understand," she snapped. "It's not the same. You're sleeping with my boss. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? Everyone at work will know. I stared at her in disbelief. The hypocrisy of it all was staggering. You wanted this, I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging around us. You've been out every night, meeting new people, enjoying this freedom. But now that I'm doing the same, suddenly it's a problem. That was when she revealed the deeper truth. Victoria had always been somewhat competitive with her, favoring others over her despite her hard work. My wife was convinced that this wasn't about attraction, that Victoria was using me to humiliate her. She's always been jealous of me, she insisted. She's doing this to get at me, to make me look like a fool. I laughed, not out of cruelty, but at the absurdity of it all. Maybe she's just attracted to me, I countered. Have you considered that possibility? Desperation flickered in her eyes as she invoked the veto rule, demanding that I end things with Victoria immediately. But I refused. That rule was meant to protect us from true discomfort, not to be wielded as a weapon of control. Over the following weeks, my marriage unraveled while my relationship with Victoria flourished. My wife grew erratic, alternating between icy silence and fiery outbursts. She spread rumors at work, even going so far as to claim Victoria was abusing her position to coerce me. When that failed, she confronted us in public, storming into a restaurant and making a scene, throwing wine in Victoria's face before being escorted out. Through it all, Victoria remained composed. But I knew this couldn't go on. That night, I returned home to pack some things, needing space from the chaos. My wife was waiting, her eyes red, tears slipping down her cheeks. I made a mistake, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never should have suggested this. Can we please close our marriage and go back to how things were? I'll do anything. For the first time in months, I looked at her and truly saw her, not the confident, demanding woman who had pushed for change, but the person I had loved for so many years. The one who, despite everything, was now realizing the cost of what she had asked for. And I had to decide whether it was too late. The question had been weighing on me since the very beginning, lingering in the back of my mind like an unspoken truth. So finally, I asked, why did you really want an open marriage? Were you already seeing someone? My wife hesitated, her face betraying the internal battle she was waging with herself. Then, with a deep breath, she admitted the truth. She had developed feelings for a coworker and had already slept with him before even suggesting the idea of an open marriage. I wanted to explore that relationship without the guilt of cheating, she confessed, her voice hollow. But it didn't work out. He was just using me for sex and bragging about it to his friends. I realized I had risked our marriage for nothing. A cold anger settled over me, a kind I had never experienced before. Every argument, every promise she had made about strengthening our relationship, every moment of doubt I had felt about myself, it had all been built on a lie. She had never been seeking mutual exploration or growth. She had simply wanted permission to cheat without consequence. And now you're upset because I found someone who actually respects me? I asked, my voice eerily calm. She looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. I didn't think you would, she admitted after a long pause. I didn't think anyone would be interested in you. The weight of that statement settled in my chest like a stone. It told me everything I needed to know about how she had truly seen me all these years. I had been the safe option, the reliable, steady husband who would always be waiting at home while she explored her options. She had never considered the possibility that I might find someone else, especially not someone like Victoria, a woman who was by all measures more successful, confident, and desirable than she was. That was the moment I knew our marriage was over. I want a divorce, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Then I turned and walked away, leaving to stay with my brother while I figured out my next steps. The calls and texts began almost immediately. Apologies, accusations, desperate pleas to reconsider. She cycled through every possible angle, trying to manipulate me into staying. When that didn't work, she escalated her tactics. She contacted my parents, telling them I was having a midlife crisis, that I was being manipulated by a wealthy woman who had seduced me away from my marriage. My mother called, concern heavy in her voice, but after I explained the full story, her disappointment wasn't directed at me, it was at the woman she had once considered a daughter. Then my wife turned to our mutual friends, spinning a carefully curated narrative where she was the wounded wife, blindsided by my supposed infidelity. Conveniently, She left out the part where she had pushed for the open marriage in the first place. Some friends took her side, but those who knew us best saw through her lies. Her most vindictive move came when she reached out to Victoria's family, including her elderly parents, attempting to paint me as a gold digger who was only using their daughter for her wealth and status. Victoria was furious but handled it with the same grace and strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. She reassured her family, calmly dispelled my wife's baseless accusations, and moved forward without letting the drama consume her. Knowing I needed distance, Victoria suggested I stay at her place while sorting out the legal process. I accepted, and what I found in her home was a peace I hadn't known in years. There was no walking on eggshells, no emotional manipulation, no constant power struggle. Just mutual respect, open communication, and a sense of security I hadn't realized I was missing. Meanwhile, my wife's behavior at work became increasingly erratic. She snapped at colleagues, missed deadlines, and made passive-aggressive remarks about Victoria in meetings. Victoria, always professional, handled it by the book, issuing warnings, documenting every incident, and eventually placing her on a performance improvement plan. Instead of addressing her own shortcomings, my wife went on the attack, accusing Victoria of workplace harassment and threatening legal action. But the company's legal team was meticulous, gathering statements from employees who contradicted her claims. Faced with the reality that her accusations wouldn't hold up, my wife eventually resigned, blaming both Victoria and me for the downfall of her career. The divorce proceedings were no less dramatic. My wife tried every tactic to delay the process, from making false claims about our shared assets to accusing me of infidelity, conveniently ignoring the fact that our marriage had been open at her insistence. She even attempted to claim emotional distress, as if she hadn't been the one who orchestrated this mess from the beginning. Fortunately, I had documented everything: our agreement to open the marriage, her own admission of infidelity before it even began, and the months she had spent dating while I stayed home alone. My lawyer advised me to offer a fair settlement to avoid dragging out the process. I did, but she refused, demanding more than half of our assets despite contributing far less financially over the years. It was Victoria who suggested a strategy. "She doesn't just want money, she wants to punish you," she observed. "What if you offer slightly more than she's legally entitled to, but with a time limit? Appeal to her greed while limiting her ability to drag this out." The approach worked. Faced with the reality of expensive legal battles she couldn't afford, my wife took the settlement. 6 months after I had walked out of our home, the divorce was finalized. By then, my relationship with Victoria had become something deep and undeniable. We moved in together officially after the divorce, and for the first time in my life, I understood what a healthy relationship truly felt like. Victoria encouraged my career growth, introduced me to people who valued me, and showed me that love should be a source of strength, not exhaustion. One day, not long after the dust had settled, I ran into my ex-wife's sister at a grocery store. She hesitated before speaking but eventually said, "I know what really happened." I raised an eyebrow. "She told you?" She nodded. "She admitted everything when she got drunk at my place one night. She never thought you'd find someone else, especially not someone like Victoria. She thought you'd try dating, fail, and then come crawling back, grateful to close the marriage on her terms when she was done exploring." Her words confirmed what I had suspected all along. My wife had never wanted an equal arrangement. She had wanted freedom without consequences, power without risk. And when the game she thought she was playing turned against her, she couldn't handle the reality of losing. "She's moving out of state next month," her sister added. "Says there are too many painful memories here." I simply nodded. I hope she finds what she's looking for. And I meant it. Some lessons in life come at a cost, but they are worth the price. My ex-wife had sought excitement, convinced that the stability we had built wasn't enough. In the end, her choices led to the very thing she had feared most: losing control. Meanwhile, the chaos she unleashed had led me to something far greater than I could have imagined. Victoria and I are now engaged. We're planning a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, focused on building a future rather than dwelling on the past.